Pattern Tools is new in Contact 8.2, and we get to it in the Tools area by clicking there. And there's one, and I'm just going to call up a pattern to get us started. Now, it combines the features of a polyphonic step sequencer and an arpeggiator. So it's kind of like an arpeggiator in that it generates repeated sequences of notes based on the keys that you hold down. But it also gives us the flexibility of a step sequencer in that we can adjust the order, the duration, we can layer notes on top of each other, add rhythm, and so on. So let's take a look at the interface. We have a pattern selector over here. We can click and open up a browser where we can select different patterns, and you get an overview of what's happening on each of the patterns in this little icon over here. So let me double click that and we'll load that in and just click that to close it. And to give you an idea what this sounds like, I'm going to turn off this so you can just hear these chords. Got them with a basic drum groove so you can hear the rhythm that's being generated. And then with this on, now we can also use these stepper buttons to go through them, and we can use this to randomly call up different patterns. And then we have a parameter lock button here, which keeps the current values of these pattern parameters that we set at the bottom, and we'll look at those in a minute. Now, the lock button over here only works when we're loading patterns using these stepper buttons or the browser. It doesn't work when we're double-clicking from the browser on the left here. Now, we have an About button. When we click here, we get some info on the plugin. And then we have the pattern editor here where we can see the contents of the pattern and we can edit. We can add or remove notes. We can mute steps and pitches, add some random drops, which we're going to look at in a minute or two. It's really a nice feature in this. We can adjust the pattern length and the play range and even the order that it plays back. Now, the way that this patterns tool generates the pitches is really interesting and unique. It collects a set of 8 pitches. Now, it's based on the notes that are held down. So, for example, these 3 notes will be used. And then it adds additional notes based on those pitches 1 octave above and then 2 octaves above. And it continues like that until it fills up all of the 8 different pitches. Now, the notes in the pattern can still be filtered by the key output range here, and they can still be influenced by this octave offset. And now we have over here a pattern move button, which is interesting because it works in all 4 directions. So we can shift the patterns a step left or right or up or down in pitch. So for example, here's this one. And if I shift it again, and then I can shift it up again, or down, and so on. And we have pattern parameters here. Here we set the speed of the grid, and we can optionally lock this when we're browsing presets. It'll maintain what we have set. We can gate each step so it's shorter, or increase it. With this sound, there's not that much extra release on it, but we can have them gated shorter or longer. We can offset the velocities of the notes that are generated. And here in this pop-up, we can set a minimum and maximum, and gravity, which will add an accent to the downbeats based on the percentage of what the other velocities are. We can offset the octave. We can set the playback direction to forward, backward, ping-ponging forward and then backward, or a random kind of shuffle mode. We can add a swing offset. We can humanize, and again, with this pop-up, we can humanize, we can specify the note duration, the note velocity, and even the skipping of notes. So as we dial that up, it'll skip some of the notes and generate variations that way. So it's getting very sparse. And so on. So let me dial that down, and let's look at working within this grid. Now here, I can click this trash can icon, and it'll reset the whole grid. So we can draw notes in simply by clicking, and this is when we're in the regular mode. And if I click and drag, it'll add longer notes like that. So here's a simple pattern, and it's 8 steps long. These steps are silent. Now we can set the length of the pattern over here. And we can also set the play range, so it doesn't have to play the whole length of the pattern. For example, I can set it to play just that part. Now, it gets even more interesting when we use the drops function, and I'll show you that in a moment. But for now, I just want to add an extra note in there, maybe up there, and that'll trigger the notes, again, based on the octaves in addition to these notes that are triggered. And I can click on it to erase them, and maybe have that one longer, and so on. Now, we also have this paintbrush tool. I'm going to clear the pattern. And with the paintbrush tool, I can just kind of draw like that. And can leave spaces and just kind of paint in the pattern you want. So let's go with something like that. And maybe I'll set the playable range a bit shorter. And I'll just take this out of that in the regular mode. I'm just going to get rid of some of the notes to make it a little less dense. So that's our basic pattern. Now we have the drops button, and it controls drops, which are optional random notes that are added to the pattern. And those notes will appear in turquoise. Right now these are all blue, but you're going to see in a moment as I add these that we'll get some turquoise ones. So if I click here, boom, it's adding in those notes. Now we have this renew button over here, which lets us manually generate a new set of drops that'll replace the current ones. And you can't really edit those. They're just sort of fixed, and you can keep generating random ones till you get what you like. I'll make it a bit longer. And I'll get rid of some of my basic ones. Now here we get an auto renew button, which will randomize the drops each time the pattern is looped. So really interesting. Let's take that off for the moment. So now I'm left with this pattern that won't change. I'll just lengthen this so that it's 8 beats long. And it sounds like that. Now it's kind of dense. What we can do is we can use these step on-off switches at the bottom, and each dot below the step will let us activate or deactivate the notes triggered on that step, and it'll mute them all above, so I can get some spaces like that. And similarly, these pitch on-off switches will let us activate or deactivate the notes at this pitch, so I can mute some of the pitches. So you can really develop and have your patterns evolve and permutate by using different combinations of muting the steps and or pitches. Now we have a retrigger function, which works as you would expect. When it's off, the pattern will start, and as we add additional notes, it goes on looping until we release the notes. So adding additional notes doesn't affect the playback. It plays back smoothly, whereas when this is on, every time I add a new note, and you can see what I'm triggering here, it'll start the pattern anew. So that's great to get some variations as well. And latch mode means that we can hit a chord, lift our fingers off, and it'll keep playing until we press the latch button again. Now, as I mentioned, we can affect the playback direction. Here it's going to ping pong back and forth. Now it's re-triggering each time because of the new chord being hit. What I'm going to do is set this to 16th notes, and then this way we'll be able to hear it go through in both directions. Just reverse. Just forward. And randomize. Technically, we can affect the duration, the velocity. I can shift it all up. And I can restrict the range over here if I want. So these are all ways to add variety to your patterns. This is not your grandfather's static arpeggiator. It's dynamic and evolving, and it gives you just the amount of control to create what you want, add in a bit of random probability, and then control that probability. And again, we can further do that by adding in things like note skip and randomizing duration and velocity. You can add some swing, and then moving the pattern. So really a lot of fun. Next video, we'll put this to work in a musical setting.